Hey, my friends, welcome once again to the Everyday Missionary Podcast. This is episode 296. It is also the end of our Theological March Madness, and it is also, on top of all of that, the Passion Week, which is the final week of Jesus, the kind of the remembrance and commemoration of everything that happened in those final handful of days, right? And today I'm recording this on Thursday, and if there's important days in that week, Thursday is certainly one of those most memorable, right? It's the day that he goes to the upper room with his disciples. He washes their feet in servanthood. He breaks bread and drinks wine with them and says, this is the symbolism of what I'm about to do for you. It's on that night he's betrayed by Judas, goes to pray in Gethsemane, is overwhelmed with anxiety, so much so that he prays multiple times where his buddies are falling asleep, but angels come and give him strength, right? So everything on that Thursday is just huge, right? But there's a lot of other things in the week that are going on as well, right? So he comes in the first day of the week. We call it the triumphal entry. For me, this last Sunday, first time I've ever done Palm Sunday. Never done it. In all my years as a pastor, I've done every other thing. I've done Ash Wednesday, man. How many non-denominational evangelicals do Ash Wednesday? I've done Ash Wednesday. Never done Palm Sunday. So did Palm Sunday and kind of talked about there that the triumphal entry is actually a grievous entry. Everybody's cheering, but Jesus is weeping. That should be the sign that like, whoa, where everybody's at and where Jesus is at, two different things. He's weeping because they reject peace. They want war. He wants peace. They don't want peace. And so he's weeping over the city because they're going to continue to reject his peace, which is an ominous warning for all of us. If we reject peace and we prefer strife and combat and war, then it's a problem. We're not probably being quite like Jesus in that sense, but that happens. There's some other things that happen that I'm going to talk about today. I'm going to talk about what happens immediately after the entry and how that has some relationship in something that I saw this week. So we're going to talk about that part of the Passion Week. But then again, you get all the way to the cross. And for me, just because I'm here and I have a microphone and I can say some stuff, to me, the most profound and powerful element of the cross is not all the different theories of atonement. In fact, the more I look at the different theories, they all make me a little happy and a little sad all at the same time, because I think sometimes they overlook what I think is the most profound thing happening with the cross, which is you have a supreme being, right? You have the divine in human form, submitting himself to the cruelty of humanity, whether it be the betrayal of friends, the coldness of empire, the rejection of religion. It doesn't really matter. It's like all of humanity is arrayed against him, and they're using force against divinity, and then divinity responds with love and forgiveness and grace. That is radical. Like if you and I had the power of God and people were abusing us, we probably would lash out, but there is a self-restraint, not only in that Jesus gives himself freely, but in this, there is this prayerfulness for this love for the very people that are doing that damage. And to me, that is the most profound display of God's love. Instead of frying everybody on the spot, he dies for them instead. That is so cool and radical, right? So that happens on Friday. And then on Saturday, we have very little direction. You know, in the Gospels, we know that the disciples are hiding away in fear because, again, the dudes were cowards. The women were the studs of the story. Like, I just want to say for the record, the women were there at the cross when the dudes were gone. The women funded Jesus' ministry, we see in the Gospel of Luke. Like, the ladies were the anchor point of Jesus and what he did. The dudes are kind of sad, right? So they're hiding away in fear on Saturday. And then, of course, we know Resurrection Sunday morning, Jesus rises from the dead. That's the big story. It's the Super Bowl of Christianity. Love that part of the story too, right? That's the big idea. Paul's like, if that didn't happen, all this other stuff doesn't really matter. Kind of the resurrection's a big thing. So much so that I sometimes wonder if we should have little stone rolled away icons more than cross icons for the symbolism of Christianity, because it seems the resurrection is the biggest component that makes all that other stuff like be a thing. Like without that, everything else isn't a thing, right? So all of that happens. But in this little discussion, what we're doing today, because now I'm starting to get sidetracked, the question of Saturday, or maybe more to the point, what did Jesus do on Saturday? We know what he did on Friday. We know what he did on Sunday. What did he do on Saturday, right? Because just think with me. I do this. I'm in my head a lot. I don't like to be in my head a lot, but that's just the brain that I was given. And so I'm in my head a lot. And what we tend to assume, at least, and I think this is a good assumption, is when you take your final breath and your eyes dim, your soul leaves your body and it goes someplace, right? Soul goes someplace. So the question is, when Jesus dies, last breath, gives up his spirit, it says, to what? To where? In other words, did Jesus on that Friday, late afternoon, early evening, his spirit go to be with God for the rest of the hours on that day and all through Saturday until he and God were just there eventually on Sunday morning? He's like, okay, now we're going to put you back in the body and you're going to raise and then kind of go about your business, right? Like, is that, or did Jesus go nowhere? Did he sleep for that time? Did he go to hell or Hades or Gehenna or prison or punishment or abyss or pit? These are all different words that are used to describe afterlife elements. Did he go to paradise? Like, where did he go, right? Like, have you ever thought about just where his soul went for that time, right? Probably you haven't much, but I think that then is like, what did he do on Saturday? Like, what's happening on that day? Now, again, in the Gospels, we don't have much direction, but we have one dogma statement from the Apostles' Creed and one very obscure passage in the book of 1 Peter that maybe points us a little bit in a direction, all right? So, if you go back and look at the Apostles' Creed, it says basically Jesus died on the cross and then he descended to hell, right? That's what it says. And people are like, that shouldn't be in there because there's no proof that Jesus descended to hell. Like he had to go to hell for us for a handful of hours, which is, again, there's all kinds of problems with that. But there is this one passage in 1 Peter. And the problem, I think, in the 1 Peter passage is it's not going to give us much direction. And it's certainly not going to resolve anything. And it's not going to bring much clarity. But it's there nonetheless. And I think it's interesting. Now, before I kind of dive into this one, I just want to highlight the fact that, and I think I said this a few weeks ago on the podcast, but in the reading of the Christian Testament in particular, especially the letters section of the Christian Testament, we're reading not only somebody else's mail, but somebody else's ancient mail, who that mail has been translated from its original language to another language, but then add to it that it is a secondhand correspondence of the mail. And what I mean by secondhand correspondence is there was a set of questions posed to Peter. Peter then responds to those questions with answers and ideas, which is this letter. But we don't have access to the original questions. So we don't have the context in which these answers are coming. We're left to decipher that. And in this section of 1 Peter, it's weird, man. I'm just going to tell you for the record, it's weird at a lot of levels. And I think some people try to clean it up and fix it and everything else. I'd rather just let it be weird, all right? But here's what it is. So it says, Christ suffered for our sins once for all time. He never sinned, but he died for sinners to bring you safely home to God. He suffered physical death, but was raised to life in the Spirit. Then it says in verse 19, so he went and preached to the spirits in prison, those who disobeyed God long ago when God patiently waited while Noah was building his boat. And he gets into the fact that only 8 were saved through a flood, which is baptism, which is weird that judgment and baptism are getting linked together, but it has something to do with the washing off of dirt. But the flood wasn't the washing off of dirt. It was the eradication of everything. I don't understand how Peter's trying to use the symbolism. It's a little bit like loose hanging there, but that's the idea. He's linking all of that there. And then he says, but now Christ has gone to heaven and he's seated at the right hand of God with all honor, with the angels and authorities and powers as they accept his authority. For this discussion today, the important part I want to hone in on is just that idea that he suffered, that he died, and then he went and preached to the spirits in prison. Now, the spirits in prison, people like to debate. What were the spirits in prison? Were they demons? I think they were at least the souls of people before and up to the time of Noah. At least that. But it could have been bigger than that. But Peter is just using this in a narrow, kind of myopic-y way. But Jesus goes and preached to spirits imprisoned. And that word preached in the Greek New Testament is like declarational, right? He declared a thing. And when we read that word declared throughout the Christian Testament, it's connected to the gospel. Almost every time it's connected to this proclaim the good news of the kingdom, proclaim the gospel, proclaim the way of peace, right? So what did Jesus do on Saturday? He went and preached the gospel to people deceased that were in this place called prison. Now, I say this place called prison because, again, one of the things we sometimes tend to overlook in reading our New Testament, for example, our Christian Testament, is when it speaks of the afterlife, it does use a lot of different branding. It's not kind of monolithic on its descriptions, right? There's a lot of different ways that it's described, and part of that is because in the time of Jesus, the afterlife was described in a lot of different ways. There was a lot of different views about afterlife in the time of Jesus, and Jesus seems to speak into many of those different views in different ways, right? And so here, Peter is kind of in that same tradition, just uses the term prison. I don't know what exactly that space is in the afterlife, but prison seems bad. But in this, Jesus is preaching the gospel to people in prison, which I think is really, really rad to me. It's super rad, right? Now, the implications of that, I'll let you speculate to your heart's content. I'm not going to get into those speculations, but what I love is the fact that between death and resurrection, Jesus is still preaching good news. Jesus is still preaching gospel. Jesus is going into prisons and giving message of liberation. You can work that through in your own mind as you see fit, because there's not enough here for me to work with to fully unpack all of that. But I just think that's super cool nonetheless, right? Like, it's the very thing that he even says in the Gospel of Matthew toward the end in chapter 25. He's like, man, you remember when I was imprisoned and I was naked and I was hungry and you visited me? Like, he's visiting people in prison and he's sharing the gospel with people in prison. That's just blowing my mind, man. And so if you've ever wondered, what did Jesus do on Saturday of the Passion Week? We don't really know for sure. We get this one little thing here, but it's pretty stellar, man. Pretty cool little anecdote there. Now, again, what we do with this from there, don't really know. What Peter's even trying to fully get at, we kind of know, like, okay, it's something about baptism, and it's Jesus did amazing things, and he brings life to people. But that seems to be Jesus' Saturday. So if you've ever wondered, now you know. Like, when I was a kid, I got up on Saturday mornings, watch cartoons. When Jesus woke up in the afterlife that Saturday morning, he went to share the gospel. I think it's rad. So that's at the end of the week, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, right? But I also said that today I wanted to deal with something that happens at the front end of the week, immediately after the triumphal entry that really should be called the non-triumphal entry, or the heartbreaking entry. As much as Good Friday should be called Bad Friday, I think the triumphal entry should be called the weeping entry, because that's really what Jesus is doing, right? But then he goes to the temple. And there's this confrontation that we're all aware of, right, where he's driving out the money changers. And he's like, this place was to be a house of prayer, right, for all the nations of the earth to come and to connect with God. And now you've monetized it. You've made it a den of thieves, right? And so he's chasing people out and flipping tables and getting on everybody's case and everything else. And I thought about it in relationship to then something I came across this week. And this is a real thing. Now, I did some homework on it because, again, I know it's real easy to just jump to conclusions and everything else. But I saw this week, it was pitched initially as President Trump has a Bible that he's selling. I'm like, no, this is like from The Onion, right? Or the Babylon Bee. This is satirical. This can't be a real thing. It's a real thing. Now, to bring clarity about this real thing, I want to help you understand what this is and what this isn't, and then the bigger problem that I think it has that I'm going to actually speak to, because I actually do think there's a big problem with this whole thing. But I want to clear this up first. First of all, this is not the Trump Bible, all right? Some people are kind of saying, Trump's got a Bible. This isn't the Trump Bible. In fact, I went to their website and was just wanting to do kind of the FAQs, because I'm like, is President Trump selling a Bible to make money to fund his campaign, or is he selling a Bible to make money to deal with a lot of his legal problems right now? Like, you know, like, what's the function behind this whole thing? And then I went to the FAQs and everything else, and so I want to read to you what's going on here. It says, and this is called the God Bless the USA Bible. That's what it's called. So first of all, it doesn't have Trump's name across the front of it like his towers and airplanes and all of his products. No, this is the God Bless the USA Bible. And it says, it is not political and has nothing to do with any political campaign. This God Bless the USA Bible.com is not owned, managed, or controlled by Donald J. Trump, the Trump Organization, CIC Ventures LLC, or any of their respective principals or affiliates. So anybody saying Trump's selling a Bible to make money, that's not exactly what's happening. But then there's another line below that statement, right? The God Bless the USA Study Bible, or Bible.com, uses Donald J. Trump's name, likeness, and image under paid license from CIC Ventures LLC, which license may be terminated or revoked according to its terms. In other words, while President Trump isn't selling a study Bible or a Bible's being sold, and they're using Trump's likeness to sell the Bible, and Trump is being paid for his likeness to sell the Bible. That's while he's not really selling the Bible, he's selling the Bible. He might not be selling the Bible against the profits of every Bible, but he's using his likeness, sold his likeness to this Bible company. And in that sense, yes, he's still making a bunch of money off of this Bible, even though it's technically not fueling his campaign and he's not owning it. He's so directly linked to it, he's making money on the Bible, right? But I wanted to make sure there was clarity, that we understood exactly what this is and isn't, and how the lines divide out, and it's all very nuanced, I know. But nonetheless, for a mere $59.99, you can have the USA Bible. All right, so it says, order yours today. Please allow 4 to 6 weeks for delivery. I'm not sure why it takes so long. Like, Amazon gets stuff to me in 2 days. This is going to be a longer runway if you're waiting for the Bible. So it says it's an easy to read, large print, and slim design. The Bible invites you to explore God's word anywhere, anytime. It says this Bible has been designed so it delivers easy reading experience in the trusted King James Version translation, which, just honestly, for the record, if you want an easy reading experience, you don't go to the King James Version, all right? You pick a New Living Translation, an NIV. The message is delightful for an easy read. King James, not slamming it, just saying, not an easy read. All right, this large print Bible will be perfect to take to church, a Bible study, work, travel, etc. This Bible also features a copy of, and this is where I have issues. This Bible also features a copy of the handwritten chorus to God Bless the USA by Lee Greenwood, which has been kind of a fan favorite of the right for a while, the U.S. Constitution, the Bill of Rights, the Declaration of Independence, and the Pledge of Allegiance. Now, this is where I might be a little bit ranty on a soapbox, and I want to try to be thoughtful because I'm trying not to just be hyperbolic, it's easy to do, or whatever else, but I just want you to put this in perspective. 3,000 years of scriptural tradition handed down to us from the Near East, different continent, different culture, different people group, in all sorts of different conditions. That's the Old Covenant or the Hebrew Testament. Then you have the Christian Testament, also coming from other continents, other backgrounds, other people groups, other nation identities, right? And then for 2,000 years moved about from kind of generation to generation all over the world and everything else. That holy scripture, right? This canonized thing to then put into it American documents, to put inside the leather, that cheap fake leather binding, to put inside that the Declaration, Bill of Rights, U.S. Constitution, a handwritten chorus, and the Pledge of Allegiance. I'm going to get to that one at the end. But to put all of that in there is reckless to me. It is reckless. Now, this isn't the first Bible to do it. There's been like the Patriots Bible and things like that. And again, I would have the same complaint there, right? I think it's awesome if you have a Bible that's a study Bible, if you have a Bible that's a devotional Bible, and it's trying to help enrich your spiritual or academic knowledge. That's awesome, right? But to do something that is so brazenly nationalistic and to put one nation's documents inside a book for all the nations, right? So that first part of the week, this was meant to be a house of prayer for all nations. This was meant to be a book for all nations, but now we're going to make it our nationalistic identity book. That, honestly, to me, that's idolatry. It's a level that is, I go, because you know me, man, I am so err on the side of grace. A lot of people think I'm too loose too often. Well, this is your day. Here's where I have some convictions. I go, this is crazy. Now, the fact that somebody wants to sell a Bible and make money doesn't shock me. The fact that President Trump would use his likeness to sell this Bible doesn't shock me. I don't even really know if I have much issue with them because it kind of falls into my expectations. Like, I get that, right? But more my thing is, we who love Jesus, we who want to honor the tradition of Scripture, should not buy this thing. And we should not just be like, oh yeah, whatever. That's capitalism. That's what it. No, we should be like, no, can we draw a line and say this is troubling? And here's why I think it's troubling to me, right? I'm a fan of the book of Revelation, but not for reasons that most people are a fan, right? So I don't really get too much into, 7 years of tribulation and rapture and all that stuff. I don't really hold to those positions as it is. I don't even think that's what Revelation's trying to do. I think it has a completely different objective, and the objective is something that I've taught, kind of borrowing from Scott McKnight's work, which Revelation comes down to two things. You're either Team Dragon or you're Team Lamb, right? And everything in Revelation that's Team Dragon is about the nations of the earth that use force and might and power and war and control and financial strength to basically control some and enrich others, right? Like, that's the way the nations work, and that's Team Dragon. And then you got Team Lamb that is very unworldly, unlike anything else. It's literally embodied as a slain lamb. The weakness factor is so strong there in comparison to the dragon and all of its strength, right? And so from that, my walkaway every time is that all the nations of the earth and all the systems that govern them are Team Dragon. it's Babylon, right? That's all it is. And so while we might really like our Constitution, our Bill of Rights, Declaration of Independence, and all of that, we also have to realize that these are all the codes of Team Dragon still. I'm not saying in that, therefore, they're completely bad, or they don't serve function and purpose, or they don't bring some good to the world, or whatever else. But what I'm saying at the end of the day is that God didn't write the Bill of Rights. God didn't write the Declaration of Independence. God did not hand that to us through divine writ so we could put it inside our Bibles. It should stay firmly outside of our Bibles, because our Bible is something for all nations. It's not to celebrate one nation or to have any one nation represented in it as somehow unique, superior, the most blessed, whatever else. That's problematic. I think this is an idolatry issue of huge and staggering proportions, and it's always before us. We are all tempted to let patriotism become idolatry, to let nationalism become idolatry, to think that our nation is more important than other nations, to vilify the very people that we're supposed to love and reach. That's one of the trends of nationalism, and sometimes one of the ugly byproducts of patriotism. And so what's tragic to me is that we have all this rich scriptural tradition that's now getting tainted by sharing pages with stuff that, again, I'm not anti these things, but they should not be sitting inside the canon. They just should not. They should be firmly outside of it, because they're two different worlds. I have no problem trying to use the Bible to inform culture. I'm a big fan. I'm post-millennial. I actually think that things are going to continue to get better by way of the gospel and transformation. But the way it gets better is it doesn't look more like Babylon. It looks less like Babylon. It doesn't lean into the tools of earth. It leans in more to the tools of what the kingdom's all about, right? So it's going to be Jesus weeping over the way of peace. We're going to start embracing the way of peace, not the way of conflict and division and superiority and the elevation of one people group above another people group, or one nation above another nation, because it's a gospel for all nations. It is a blessing to all the nations, all the families of the earth are meant to be blessed through Jesus and the gospel, and therefore this stuff in our book is a bad thing. It's a bad thing. And the last one is the one that, again, this is my soapbox now. It's the idea that it has the Pledge of Allegiance. And this one really bothers me. Now, I've shared before on the podcast that I do not do the Pledge of Allegiance. I do not do it out of conscience. I'm not saying you're wrong if you do it. I'm saying I'm wrong if I do it. And I'll explain the reason for a minute. But I just want to be clear as far as when a Pledge of Allegiance comes up, what I do. I stand. I show respect to the flag. So, my heart is not to be in protest or whatever else. I might even put my hand over my chest while the pledge is being said, but I will not utter the words of the Pledge of Allegiance. And here's why. In the book of Revelation, again, Team Dragon, Team Lamb, I can have allegiance to one. And the book of Revelation has this idea of where's your allegiance? You must decide your allegiance. It's either Lamb or Dragon. And because I think all nations are ultimately Team Dragon, all nations are out of alignment with the way of the peacemaking of Christ. I love America, but guess what? It's Team Dragon. It's not Lamb. It's Babylon. That's the thing. And so if I can't swear allegiance both to Lamb and Dragon. That's not a possibility. Jesus says, hey man, it's either God or money. Pick your side, but you can't do both. And I think in the same, I can love my country. I can serve my country. I can care for my country. I can pray for my country. I can appreciate my country, but I cannot swear allegiance to more than one. Right. And so for that reason, I will, again, love, respect, serve, all those things, appreciate, but I will not lose sight of the fact that Jesus came for all nations. And my mission is to all nations and to all peoples. And I'm not allowed to let any person be my enemy. All persons need to be my neighbor, my friend. And if an enemy I love, care for, pray for, do good to, right? And this is part of the problem with nationalism at times, and even a level of patriotism that turns into idolatry. It's we're better, you're worse, we're good guys, you're bad guys. I don't love those enemies over there. Maybe I love some of these enemies over here. Jesus doesn't give us that luxury. He's like, man, I don't know how to break it to you. You have one enemy, and they don't walk the planet, right? That's it. So, fine, hate the devil, but every person, you got to love them. You got to serve them. You got to do even the most awful, evil, vile, destructive. Right. Jesus is trying to change the world through us loving the unlovely. That's kind of the big idea of what the gospel is all about. It's the big idea of what the message of the kingdom is all about. And that is frankly the only marching orders he gave us, man. He never said, yep, you can hate those people over there. Yep, you can think you're better than those people over there. He's like, no, you want to be great in the kingdom? You be least, right? You want to be awesome? Be the most broken, humble, contrite, take the last spot. That's to be the first, so in that sense, what this does to me is it utterly corrupts the otherness of what Jesus is doing, right? It should not be in the same book. Put it in a different book. Great. Put it in a different book. I mean, I wouldn't want a Seahawks version of the Bible, but I love my Seahawks. But I don't want like Seahawks stats in the back of my Bible, right? I love my Kraken. I don't want like the Kraken study Bible. This is dumb, right? So let's let Scripture be Scripture. Let's let everything else be everything else, and let's realize that maybe these two do not quite join in the way that we think they do join, or should join, or could join, because again, we have a much bigger thing that we're meant to do, which is to not have a love affair with this world, including the governing documents of one nation in this world, right? That's the dilemma. That's the thing. Our allegiance is to be to Jesus. Our way is to be the way of Jesus, doing things as Jesus would have us do them. And part of this here, in my concern, is like on social media this week, it was all of these people that I keep trying to break through and say like, hey man, not all evangelicals are like this. And it's the people that have kind of walked away or deconstructed or whatever else. And they think that we're all a bunch of, just overly patriotic at the cost of Jesus supporters. And I go, this just reinforces it. So again, I got to disrupt the stereotype so they understand this is not truly the way of Jesus. This kind of nationalism stuff, yes, I think it's cancerous to the true message of Christ. And now you have to kind of say that. And it's sad to say it, but boy, we've got to be a voice for this. We've just got to be a voice for this, right? We've got to be sharing, declaring, endorsing better, just better, right? Because, man, people need to see Jesus clearly, right? That's what this podcast is really all about, man. How are we going to be an everyday missionary? How am I going to show the authentic Jesus to a world that they're getting a lot of caricatures and sketches of him, like some that are close to the Jesus thing and some that are really far away. And on the political front, boy, this is a rough one. This is a rough one. So this is where we got to up our game, kids. This is where we got to do it different. This is where we got to be in the trenches to be like Jesus, embracing that Jesus-like stuff and just sending a very different message to the world. And I think the more we do that and we lean into that, we fight for that and we make that happen, man, the more we will be effective everyday missionaries.